afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you again this afternoon. Thank you for being here to cover the announcement of key decisions taken at the first cabinet meeting that was held yesterday, the 17th of January 2023. Fairly soon after I was sworn in as the Prime Minister, I made a commitment that I would be making announcements on the decisions reached by Cabinet, making the announcements to the nation so that the people can see and know what their government is doing. I feel that it is very, very important that we do that after each cabinet meeting. Yesterday was a cabinet meeting, and I thank you for bearing with us until today. These post-cabinet briefings will be a regular feature, and every 2 weeks we will be doing this, and you may also be receiving a copy of the calendar for the remaining part of this year. The key decisions that I would like to announce today include the approval of the rules and guidelines for ministers, and also the redeployment of funds within the 2022 to 2023 national budget to meet critical expenditure that we have come up with as part of satisfying our objectives and also meeting the various promises we had made during our campaign. While these key decisions reached by Cabinet yesterday number only a few, they constitute fundamental changes to the machinery of government, in particular the civil service, as well as the tertiary loan scheme, which benefit thousands of our students annually. Each decision will require implementation by ministers and ministries and further consequential action, and they will report their progress back to Cabinet. I will elaborate on those key issues now. General rules and guidelines for ministers. Cabinet first approved the general rules and guidelines for ministers and how we should conduct ourselves in the context of decision-making. Decision-making in Cabinet is consensus, is by consensus. There is no voting. Ministers are encouraged to speak freely in our Cabinet meetings and in the discussions on any given proposal. Prior to the papers being brought up, there would have been interministerial coordination, but that does not stop the ministers, non-proposers of the Cabinet papers, from also contributing during discussions. The first duty of ministers is fully to participate fully in discussions on policy matters which only Cabinet can decide. And it is a collective responsibility and one of the fundamental principles of decision-making in Cabinet. It is a collective responsibility. No one can come out and say, I didn't agree with that. Because once we agree as a Cabinet, that becomes government policy and is implemented. Policies determined by Cabinet must then be actioned by the ministers and their respective ministries. Ministers are public office holders and are expected to conduct themselves in a manner befitting their role as servants of the people. A minister should not use any official information which comes to him or her as a minister during Cabinet discussion for his or her private profit or for the benefit of their friends and close associates of the ministers, and ministers must not solicit, encourage, or accept gifts, benefits, or favor, either for themselves or for another person in connection with the performance or non-performance of his or her official duty. Cabinet also agreed that any gifts received by ministers must be declared and recorded in a gift register in individual ministries. Ministers who were also reminded that matters before the Cabinet are confidential in nature. In fact, Cabinet papers are classified secret and shall not be released without the prior approval of the Prime Minister. Cabinet also agreed on a calendar of meetings, as I mentioned earlier, for the 2023 to 24 season. Next is retirement age. Cabinet approved the revision of the retirement age policy for employees and wage earners in the civil service, and the removal of contract-based appointments for all civil servants, except for those appointed for projects with a specific time frame. Cabinet also agreed that the change in retirement age to 60 years, optional at 55, and the removal of contract-based appointments apply to civil servants effective from 1st of January 2023 for those below permanent secretary level. However, Cabinet noted the many vacancies and chronic shortage of teachers, doctors, and nurses. It was agreed then that the increase in retirement age be applicable from the 1st of January 2022 because of that specific consideration of those professions for teachers, doctors, and nurses. Cabinet also agreed the necessary amendments to the Civil Service General Regulations 1999, accordingly via the Government Gazette, to be published later this week. Consequently, the Public Service Commission will be working closely with all permanent secretaries to operationalize the amendment to the regulations on retirement age and the removal of contract-based appointments for civil servants and government wage earners. Cabinet also recognizes that there are other civil servants who retired in 2022 and agreed that the Public Service Commission, the Prime Minister's Office, and Ministry of Finance will consult with government agencies and revert with a holistic submission to Cabinet on the practicality of extending this to the rest of the public service. Redeployment of funds. You'll note that some of you had asked me about when the mini budget will be announced. There will not be a mini budget. Instead of that, we will redeploy funds from within the 2022-2023 budget to accommodate certain immediate priorities of the government, to cater for additional funding requests received from ministries and other agencies. The decision was based on a submission made by the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance and Strategic Planning, National Development and Statistics, the Honorable Professor Biman Prasad. In any financial year, if ministries are unable to meet unbudgeted or unforeseen commitments from within their respective budget, there is a provision under the Financial Management Act of 2004 that enables the redeployment of available balances from other ministries to fund these unbudgeted or unforeseen commitments, commonly known as additional provisions from within the budget, but different heads. The redeployment will allow the government to immediately release an initial amount of $10 million to the University of the South Pacific. Going forward, government in discussion with USP hopes to agree to a payment plan to be funded in future budgets in addition to USP's regular annual grant, which will be restored in the 2023-24 budget in July. The redeployment will also cater for the one-off $200 back-to-school support payment for students from early childhood education to year 13, whose parents or guardians' gross household annual income is below $50,000. Other agencies that will receive funding through the redeployment exercise include Fiji Servicemen's Aftercare Fund, the Electoral Commission, the Republic of Fiji Military Forces, the Ministry of Public Works and Meteorological Services, Fiji Roads Authority, and the Generally Served Vote to cater for the bus fare subsidy program. TELS, common interest topic. Cabinet considered a submission from the Minister for Education on the Tertiary Education Loan Scheme, commonly known as TELS, and agreed that more time be given to the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Finance, and the Solicitor General's Office to thoroughly consider the legal and financial implications of the suspension of existing loan repayments and write-off for all outstanding student debts owed to government, and to bring the necessary legislative and policy amendments back to Cabinet. Cabinet also agreed that the current arrangements on TELS will continue for semester 1, 2023, and that it will be extended to students who want to undertake foundation studies. You'll know that that was not the case before. We agreed to remove the vaccination requirement for TELS recipients and approved the deferment of debt repayment under the scheme to the Fiji Revenue and Customs Service until the relevant legislation is amended. We had information paper on the financial status of the Fiji Sugar Corporation. The Minister for Finance briefed Cabinet on the status of the Fiji Sugar Corporation. It was agreed that all stakeholders work together to revitalize the sugar industry. There were several other information papers that were tabled yesterday, and they include the Cabinet approving the hosting of the 16th session of Codex Committee North America and Southwest Pacific, very long acronym here, CCESWP. And I told you what it stood for. Codex Committee North America and Southwest Pacific, from 30 January to 3rd of February 2023. The 15th session of that long acronym was held at Port Vila in Vanuatu, where it was proposed to recommend international Codex standards for Yangona, Noni Jews in the region. Also at that session, Fiji was proposed to the Codex Commission to be elected as the next regional coordinator to host the 16th session of that organization, CCESWP, which will happen later this year. Fiji's appointment as regional coordinator was confirmed at the 43rd session of Codex Alimentarians Committee. And based on that, Cabinet made its decision on the paper that was submitted by the Minister for Agriculture and Waterways, the Honorable Watimi Realu. The Codex Alimentarians Food Code, or Codex, is a collection of international recognized standards, codes of practice, guidelines, and other recommendations published by the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, in collaboration with WHO, World Health Organization, and they relate to food, food production, food labeling, and food safety. It is an international code of food standards. The Codex Alimentarius includes provisions in respect of food hygiene, food additives, pesticide residues, contaminants, labeling and presentation, methods of analysis, and sampling. It also includes provisions of an advisory nature in the form of codes of practice, guidelines, and other recommended measures. Currently, the Codex Alimentarius Commission has 188 Codex member countries and one member organization, which is the European Union. Cabinet approved the grant aid agreement for climate change mitigation on nature-based solutions project between the Ministry of Waterways and the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources for the Kiwa Initiative. Cabinet has approved, has approved a grant aid agreement between the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, and the Ministry of Waterways for the Climate Change Adaptation and Nature-Based Solutions Program and Kiwa Initiative Program. The IUCN has committed a total grant funding of Euro 326,077.4 for the project. Cabinet based its decision on a submission that was made to it by the Minister for Agriculture and Waterways, Honorable Watim Rayalu. The nature-based coastal protection project will reduce the vulnerability of coastal communities to coastal inundation, and coastal erosion through the provision of nature-based seawalls. Through these fundings, the ministry will be able to construct 6 seawalls at selected sites in Fiji. These sites are Nakawanga Village, Vesi Village, Lingau Lebu Village, Somo Village, Navola Village, and Navolao No. 1 Village. However, the ministry reserves the right to change the number of sites to successfully complete the project within the allocated budget. The project will protect a total coastline of 1,565 meters and assist 1,455 individuals directly affected by climate vulnerabilities. The project implementation starts from the agreement signing date until January 2025, with provisions for an extension after consultation with the donor, IUCN. The program provides for capacity building of local and national governments, civil service organizations, including those representing women and indigenous peoples, and others to design and implement rights-based, gender-sensitive, and socially inclusive small to medium-scale projects or nature-based solutions for climate change adaptation at the local and national level. Copies of what I'm telling you now will be made available to you and also probably put out in the newspaper for people to read and reread. Thank you for your time.